There is a hill in Jefferson County, Kentucky, that locals do not visit after dark. To understand the horror of what sits on top of this hill, you must first understand the geography of what lies beneath it. In the early 20th century, the city of Louisville was built in a low-lying valley, surrounded by the wetlands of the Ohio River. It was a city bathed in constant moisture, stagnant air, and dampness. It was the absolute perfect breeding ground for a microscopic monster. They called it the White Plague. We know it today as tuberculosis. Tuberculosis was not a gentle death. It was a bacteria that literally ate the lungs from the inside out. Patients would suffer from violent, unstoppable coughing fits, bringing up chunks of their own decaying respiratory tissue, mixed with bright red blood. It was highly contagious, and in the 1900s, a diagnosis was an absolute death sentence. Louisville became the epicenter of the outbreak. The city was drowning in the infected. Families were being wiped out. The state realized they needed to isolate the sick. They needed to remove them from society entirely. In 1910, they opened a small, 2-story wooden hospital on the highest, windiest hill they could find. But the plague moved too fast. By 1926, that small hospital was replaced by a colossal bat-winged 5-story Gothic fortress of brick and concrete. This was the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. It was designed to be a self-sustaining city of the sick. It had its own water treatment plant, its own post office, its own farms. Once you crossed the threshold into Waverly Hills, you were completely cut off from the outside world. You were in the waiting room for the grave. Before the discovery of antibiotics, medical science was entirely helpless against the White Plague. Desperate doctors resorted to brutal, experimental treatments that bordered on torture. The foremost belief was that the bacteria could be killed by extreme exposure to fresh air and ultraviolet light. This was known as heliotherapy. It sounds harmless, until you realize the doctors enforced this in the dead of winter. Emaciated, dying patients were wheeled out onto open-air balconies during freezing Kentucky blizzards. They were left there for hours, covered in snow, shivering violently as their failing lungs struggled to pull in the sub-zero air. But the fresh air didn't cure the worst cases. For those patients, the doctors turned to the scalpel. If a lung was failing, doctors believed they needed to rest the lung by collapsing it. First, they tried inserting balloons into the chest cavity to crush the lung. When that failed, they performed a horrific surgery called thoracoplasty. Imagine lying on a cold steel table in 1930. Medical anesthesia is primitive. You are awake. The surgeon makes a massive incision down your back and physically saws through your rib cage. They would remove up to 7 or 8 of your ribs, allowing your chest wall to physically collapse inward, permanently crushing the lung beneath it. The procedure was so incredibly traumatic that patients had to have it done in multiple agonizing stages over several weeks. The survival rate was abysmal. Those who survived were left permanently disfigured. Those who didn't were quietly taken to the basement. By the height of the epidemic, the death toll at Waverly Hills was apocalyptic. At its worst, the hospital was losing a patient every single hour. The medical director faced a severe psychological crisis. The patients living in the sanatorium were already terrified, isolated, and fighting for their lives. If they saw a constant, unending parade of dead bodies being carried out the front doors, they would lose all hope. And a patient without hope dies faster. To solve this, the administration engineered a dark, logistical solution. Directly beneath the first floor, they carved a 500-foot-long tunnel through the solid limestone of the hill. It led from the hospital's basement all the way down to the train tracks at the bottom of the valley. They called it the body chute. When a patient died, their body was not moved during the day. In the dead of night, nurses would place the corpse on a motorized metal gurney. The body was quietly lowered down the freezing, dripping, pitch-black tunnel, entirely out of sight of the living. For almost 20 years, this concrete vein acted as a silent, non-stop conveyor belt of human tragedy. With over 63,000 deaths recorded within its walls, the architecture of Waverly Hills became deeply saturated in pain. But it wasn't just the patients who suffered. The psychological toll on the medical staff was catastrophic. Nowhere is this more evident than in room 502. In 1928, a 29-year-old head nurse was assigned to the 5th floor, the ward for the most severely infected, mentally unstable patients. She spent her days surrounded by coughing, blood, and the smell of decaying flesh. That same year, she discovered she was pregnant out of wedlock by one of the doctors. Faced with social ruin and psychologically broken by the relentless death surrounding her, she walked into room 502, tied a wire to an exposed pipe, and hung herself. Her body wasn't found for hours. Tragically, history repeated itself. In 1932, another nurse working in the exact same room suffered a mental break. She opened the window of room 502, stepped out onto the ledge, and plummeted to her death, shattering on the concrete courtyard below. To this day, paranormal investigators who enter room 502 report severe drops in temperature, the phantom smell of old medical iodine, and an overwhelming, crushing sense of despair. In 1943, a miracle happened. An antibiotic called streptomycin was introduced. It was the cure for the White Plague. Slowly, the coughing stopped. The balconies were emptied. The brutal surgeries ended. By 1961, there were so few patients left that Waverly Hills was forced to close its doors. Today, the colossal brick structure sits abandoned. Its windows are shattered, its paint is peeling, and the surrounding forest is slowly reclaiming the concrete. But the body chute is still there, a hollow, dark throat cut into the stone. They say that time heals all wounds, but some places absorb too much suffering. Some places do not forget. Thank you for watching Dreadverse. Sleep well tonight.